How do we help process in our own hearts that we're not really facing an enemy across the boardroom table, or necessarily even a friend? I mean, things can change from day to day depending on circumstances in life and personal responses to them. And right now, there's such a wave of things creating such a high layer of anxiety that is bringing out both the best and worst in everybody, ourselves included. And it's just a difficult time to lead. So putting some of this into a hope perspective will be helpful for all of us. One text, which by sharing this, I hope we can sort of understand the point behind it, is from Ephesians 6. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So as we think about that text, clearly it's talking an awful lot about spiritual realities that we cannot see. It's also talking about systems, authorities that are beyond our control in a huge way, and yet we live within these systems. There's spiritual realities, there's political realities, there's relational realities, and all of these things are floating around us and everybody else all the time that are leading to conflict. Conflict arising from things that we often ourselves don't understand, neither the people that are experiencing them. So the person who is far left and is like, you aren't doing enough to protect from the coronavirus, or why isn't every message about the systemic racism in our country? Or how come you aren't stepping down and bringing in an African-American leader at long last in your church, or whatever? And then there's the far right, of course. Mask schmask, the devil is Governor Newsom, and we can't, kneel to Caesar. That's, Christians don't do that. It's all about my right as a Christian. All of these are flowing from, in many ways, how we are raised, the news channels we listen to, what our favorite uncle mentioned to us, what our daughter is learning in school and sharing and helping us be momentarily woke. I mean, all of these things are coming from all sorts of places. So the person who is opposing you is not your enemy. The person who's opposing you is somebody who's responding out of the world and the environment in which they are raised, in which they're living. And we are too. As followers of Jesus, we can transcend a lot of what traps our minds and spirits. And that's our hope as Christian leaders, that we'll be able to do that. But I do want us to think a little bit just about systems. I think you can kind of see where I'm going. And I'm going to be sharing a bit about systems theory and leadership. So this is a biosphere in the Arctic, and we have a polar bear, and the polar bear eats the seal, and the seal eats the fish, and the fish eat the plankton. And if there's no plankton, then the fish die, and there's nothing for the seals to eat, so there's no more seals, so the bear starves. Obviously, the bear is going to blame the seals, or perhaps even if he's really woke, the fish, which is causing the lack of seals, without understanding that it's carbon in the atmosphere overheating the oceans, causing the death of the plankton, something that he has no visual control over because it's all being generated from factories in China and New York. So when we think about systems, we're all clearly aware, right, that we live in a world where things that happen to us may have a cause far away from us, and that all of our systems are extremely interconnected. We aren't quite living through the Black Plague of the Middle Ages, but I mean, that was horrible. People were completely freaked out, and they should have been. But what was even more freaky is they were starving. A part of the reason why they were unable to fight off, at least in Europe, the plague is because there was pandemic malnutrition, because a volcano in Iceland erupted, causing a massive field of ash to create a layer in the atmosphere that caused cooling and killed huge percentages of the crops throughout Europe. So people were literally digging in the dirt with their hands to try to get whatever kind of food they could get out of the land. A judgment of God, of course, according to priests. Maybe it was, I don't know. But it was also certainly a volcano in a place they had never heard of or could never have imagined, that created a weakness in their systems that prevented them from being able to fight off an already deadly and terrible plague. So we think murder hornets are bad. The point is, there's always something happening in a place you can't see or even aware of that is likely having a profound impact on your environment and the way that we're thinking and the way that we're operating. And that's true from the largest cosmic scales. I mean, someday the sun is going to actually explode, then condense, and all life in our solar system as we know it will be gone. That's beyond our control. So there's things that are happening at cosmic scales, at microcosmic scales, and at relational scales. I want to focus on some of the relational scales, if I might, because that's where we kind of deal from day to day. And I hope we'll have some kind of good perspective. So I'm going to talk first about family systems just a little, and then I want to broaden that out to the church. This is my family. This is an old picture. It's been a while since we've all actually been able to be together in the same place at the same time. But Murray Bowen, who actually kind of founded the family systems branch of psychology, a truly brilliant person, by the way, says the family is a cohesive emotional unit, each member being intensely emotionally connected. A family functions as a system wherein each member plays a specific role, follows certain rules. Based on the roles, patterns develop within the system, and each member's behavior impact other members in predictable ways. Now, you probably see this in your own family. There might even be phrases that if you begin, others will complete the second half. It's a calibrated system. You do this, they do that. In some families, dad opens the door coming home from church and the kids run into his arms. It's almost reflexive. In some families, dad opens the door and the kids run into their bedroom, fearing what reprisal will happen next. It's almost reflexive. It's a calibrated system. The way that people take on roles have impact on others and very rarely change unless you have a change in the system. So I had the picture here of myself that's in the glasses. That was in a momentary phase and I was in decent shape. Yes, that is still me. My wife, Carrie, my oldest son, Lars, looking like a vampire behind him. My second son, Jake, peeking out between us. To the left of Jake, at least how I'm looking at the picture, is my son, Alex, who is the twin of my son, Felix. Although Alex is older by 2 minutes, he came out first. So thinking about roles, I want you to be looking at that picture, and I want you to think about a couple of really common roles that take place in a family. For example, there's the hero role in family systems theory. So the hero is typically the person that everybody can count on to lead, to point the right direction, to help keep the family moving forward as a unit, the emotional core, the strength. Then there's the rescuer. When there's conflict in the family, if somebody's needs aren't met, if somebody's going to argue or complain, the rescuer will often try to fix it emotionally. Oh, no, he didn't really mean that. Or, oh, you didn't get a hamburger, here, have mine. In whatever fashion or form, the rescuer is going to try to eliminate anxiety in the family by meeting needs, even at personal self-sacrifice. Often, in times of anxiety in the family, the clown will surface to kind of distract from all of the difficulties. Do something goofy, something funny, something unusual, just to get people laughing because the tense moment is too much for the family unit to bear in their intense emotional connections. And then uh, I'll, I'll just leave it at that. The rescuer, the clown, the hero, and what was the other one I mentioned? That's it. I'll just leave it there. Okay, so there's 8, by the way. We're not going to go into this whole thing. I just want us to understand the idea that we all have roles. Now look at that picture, and I'm going to ask you to think about which person in that picture do you think is the hero? Do you think is the rescuer? Do you think is the clown? So I'm just going to call on someone and let you take a stab at it. Matt, who do you think was the hero in that picture?
Oh man, I was hoping you'd ask me who I thought the clown was. Uh, I guess the hero in that picture, I would guess, would be you, because you're kind of out in front, and they're kind of you're kind of setting it up, and they're kind of behind you, kind of around you. So I guess you, or maybe your wife.
All right, that's a really good guess. Thank you. Sam, who in that picture do you think might be the clown?
That's the one I was hoping to get. I think it was your son acting like a vampire. Clearly, clearly he didn't care that he looked, like Smiley in the photo. He was like ready to be goofy. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Theo, who do you think might have been the rescuer?
Oh boy, that's it. That's a hard one to tell. But I might guess the mom is oftentimes the rescuer, so I'm going to guess your wife.
Yeah, good. Thank you, everybody. Those are some really good guesses. Well, it is obvious who the clown is. There's no possible way in the world to get Lars to be serious in any circumstance. His default way of dealing with the world and with difficulty is to kind of just laugh at it and be goofy. Actually, the rescuer in our family is Jake. Jake, the second son, is always looking for ways to make sure that whenever anxiety happens, whenever there's discomfort, he meets that need immediately. He's the one that will give away his hamburger if somebody is hungry, even if he is hungry. He's the one that if he sees somebody kind of not being included in the group, he will make sure that he brings them in, includes them. He's the one that if there's anybody that's sad or crying, he'll go over and put his arm around them. He is the rescuer. And although I'd love to play the role of hero with my Racer X shirt and cool shades, actually in our family at this stage in our life, Alex is the hero. And that picture, you might not know it, Alex is only 15 years old. He looks older. But he's a 50-year-old man in a 15-year-old body. He's always regimented, always clear, always knows exactly what needs to be done. And that's a picture of our family when we lived in Chicago on the first trip with the kids to California. It wasn't my idea, it's Alex's. He's the one that said, okay, family, we're going to go to California. And he organized it and he plotted it. I paid for it, but he kind of figured out everything was going. I was standing out in front, but we would not have been there if Alex had not had the emotional temerity, energy, and capacity to actually be the shadow leader for the family. Well, I share that. In each of our families, you'll recognize those and other roles as well. There are people that always kind of act in a consistent way to fulfill what's expected of them, even if it's not explicit what's expected of them. Same thing is true in your church, right? I mean, on your board, there's always going to be somebody that tries to lighten the mood in the middle of a tense conversation. Somebody who always tries to, in the moment of, in a heated moment where you're about to have a breakthrough on a really important matter that required crisis to get to, immediately tries to lower the level of anxiety and crisis so that you don't have to make a decision and thereby maybe hurt somebody's feelings because you really can't live in a world where people feel sad. It's just the wrongest thing. And et cetera, et cetera. There are people that play those roles, partly because in every system, and we move toward reducing the level of anxiety. Every system, every family, every church, every nation, that's our preferred status, a place where everybody feels harmonious. And so we will move in that direction by default. Well, as we think about family systems, and as we think about the emotions that we're dealing with ourselves and that we're dealing with in our churches, I think it's clear and something we all are aware of that emotions and behavior have hidden roots. Even we as pastors who deeply pray, read the Bible, know Jesus, maybe even have had good psychology training and perhaps have been through therapy ourselves, still don't really plumb the depths of our own hearts. Jeremiah 17:9 is a verse that to me is important for all of us in awareness of our own leadership and those we lead. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? And it's not to say that the heart is evil beyond all cure. It's that your emotional drives, your passions, do not always flow from things that are real or have the intended impact that you'd like to see in the long run. They flow from things you want, from desire. And however that desire is formed will likely be what your heart or your passion drives you to do. That's true for you. That's true for everybody on your leadership team. Likewise, we need to remember always that I'm a product of my parents, who are a product of theirs, who were a product of theirs. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. Well, just think about that for a brief moment. I don't look at that text and see that as a pernicious, angry God with a grudge that he holds against the children of the children of the children of an evildoer, or just automatically blesses the children of the children of the children of a righteous person. In fact, too much of the scripture points out quite the opposite, to see that as the de facto meaning of that text. But one thing we can clearly understand is that we are impacted from generation to generation by those who come before. And right now in our own country, regardless of where you stand in terms of racial issues, we have 400 generational years of systemic racism. Have things gotten better? Absolutely. Are things perfect? No, and they likely never will be. But we can't understand the way everybody is reacting, left, right, black, white, immigrant, naturalized resident, etc., without understanding that there is this generational weight of history that's moving us invisibly. We aren't even intentionally aware of it most of the time. And that can be good and bad. There are good systems, good generations that happen as a result of good decisions that were made before you were even born. So being aware that there's always this huge weight, this cloud of witnesses constantly surrounding us is really important as a leader. I think it helps us not to get too bent out of shape when we ourselves react in a bad way, not to take too much credit when we ourselves act in a good way, in fact. But likewise, and especially as a leader, not to get too bent out of shape when people are acting in adverse, immature, ineffective ways in the church. The point of our discussion today is how do we become better leaders in the midst of all of that with this awareness. So as you think about your own family of origin, just as a way of example, and some of what you learned growing up has been modified significantly through the transformational power of Jesus in your life. For me, it certainly is true. But understand that it also still impacts you, and things will surface as you lead based upon your own family of origin. So your family of origin has impact on your view of God, finance, parenting, division of labor. What do men and women do? What's the role of children? How should education be approached? Is it valuable or not? What's the value of work? How do you feel about your body? And what's the point of a body? How do you feel about people that aren't your same ethnicity or race? What's your view on addicts and addictions, or politics, or entertainment, or evangelism, or all of that? A lot of that has a whole lot more to do with where you grew up and who raised you than even any innate biblical awareness. So real quick question, I'm just going to randomly go around. I'm going to ask a really uncomfortable question just because I'm going to ask you to share something that you learned from your childhood. So Sam, I'm going to ask you, as you were growing up, is there anything about the way you were raised that impacts how you view a body?
Yeah, so you were prepping your question there, and I was thinking, man, he's gonna call on me first. I have a feeling, and I gotta have something. Like going through the catalog of my childhood.
Everybody was thinking that.
One of the things. But thankfully, you gave me a specific example. So specifically with the body, I know that I grew up my dad was a pastor in a charismatic tradition where worship was very exuberant, experience of the Spirit was very powerful, potent in worship. My dad was a very musically gifted pastor, and so singing and the feeling of worship and spirituality in Sunday morning service was like a really central aspect of our church community. And people would like use their bodies to dance, to clap, to sing, and physically move to really express their devotion and worship. I always felt uncomfortable with that. I never felt like I resonated with that style. And so to some degree, there was a bit of a like, I don't know what you would call it, not a conflict really, but it definitely, there was a way in which my natural mode that I kind of knew about myself of how I worship God was not exuberant and flamboyant. It was pretty much more reserved, silent, quiet. And so it was interesting. I'd have comments even from like, my parents never really commented on this, but one or two times I remember comments from people saying, "Oh, you look so, quiet or timid or shy," or something like that. And I was like, well, I'm worshiping God. It's not that I'm not worshiping God. I don't feel drawn to the use of my body that way. Like I'm not a clapper. I'm not a raise my hands up high kind of person. I'm like almost like a monk monastic kind of model of my hands folded, my head bowed type thing. So anyway, that's one experience of how I know my family and my church, kind of the view of the body, and particularly in worship, was just the reality and something I've observed, even thought about it. Even to this day, like I have, like our Spanish congregation has a very vibrant, flamboyant worship, clapping, moving the body. Some people will dance, and I just won't. And I've talked to Pastors Leo and Elvia and said, don't ever look at that as a reflection on you or as like I'm judging you for doing that. Like I like all for a freedom of expression in different ways. So just know that this is my way and that your way is totally fine. Like there's no weirdness between us because I'm not doing it the way you are. So anyway, that's been an interesting present day conversation about that. But
yeah, thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
And that's super insightful to recognize people aren't more or less spiritual because of how they view and use their body in worship. It's a lot more to do with the culture in which they were raised. So that's helpful. That's good insight, and that's kind of the whole point of this little exercise. So thinking about all the ways in which our family of origin has impacted our view. By the way, impact can be, I embrace it because that's how I was raised, or I reject it because I hated the way I was raised. Either which, it's a reflection of our family of origin. Matt, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. I'm going to ask, how did being raised in your family affect the way you approach politics?
So up until my college years, I just went with exactly kind of their line of thinking and how they thought. And then I started thinking for myself, and I started becoming friends with other people, and I started having a different viewpoint. So it kind of shifted. I think Free Methodism also, going back to my roots in Free Methodism, has shaped that too. So up until my college years, it was just party line. But I think seeing more of the world made it different.
You bring a really good point in sharing that, by the way. The more people interact with other systems, other groups, other people outside of their closed system, the more likely they will have a deeper understanding of different choices or different ways to respond to their environment. So that's really helpful. Well, I could keep going around in the circle. Welcome, Brock. Glad you joined the group.
Yeah.
Woohoo. We're talking about family systems and leadership in our church in the
Very
midst of
interesting.
kind of a crazy time. So with that little list of all the things, and that wasn't by any means a comprehensive list, we just need to be aware that when you're, first of all, when you're acting in your own life, you're acting not entirely of your own volition, but often out of just what you know, because that's how you were raised. That's just, or responding again, reacting against something. And this can happen in an abusive household, for example. Somebody might, as they are raised in an abusive household, find Jesus and say, I will never raise a family like that. I will never treat other people like that. And so there's a reaction against the way you were raised. Others who perhaps may not even know there's a choice will say, well, this is how my dad or my mom did it, and I'm just going to beat the living devil out of you until you do what I tell you to do as a parenting strategy. So as you lead, just remember, you're leading complex people with complex stories that are not, almost never acting against you, by the way, or against your leadership. Almost always they're acting for themselves or out of their own understanding. So when we think about our areas of conflict, remember, we battle not against flesh and blood. We really don't. We battle not against the living human being made in the image of God sitting across the table from you, or worshiping, Theo, in your church with their masks, so you have no idea whether they're smiling or grimacing. But in the midst of all of this, just be aware that there's always more going on than meets the eye, and allow that to drive you to humility, patience, long-suffering, even while you lead in a healthy direction that needs to be taken. Okay, so just going to share a slide, although I could just say it, because I think as Christian leaders, we absolutely need to understand that what we were shapes what we are, but it is by no means destiny. By no means is how we were raised, or the culture in which we were raised, or the church and religious structures that may have been toxic in which we were raised, a pattern that we are required to follow. That's not the case. We are made new creatures through the transforming power of Jesus Christ. There is opportunity to break out of calibrated, unhealthy systems. So as we think about our own families, I'd like us to translate this more intentionally toward thinking about the church system. And I'm going to use a story of how Jesus led during a particularly intense time. They were all intense times. But we know the story from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, about the woman caught in adultery. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down and again wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Now, go, sin no more." So we know this story very, very well. And I'm going to kind of think through this story and walk through this story with you in light of some systems theory thinking. And seeing Jesus, I think we can all agree, regardless of where we were raised or our family of origin, that Jesus is the best model of good leadership we could ever look to. And if you don't, that's okay. I still love you because that's what Jesus taught me to do. So thinking about this, we have a family system. We have a woman who is undoubtedly in a family. And no doubt the man that she was with is undoubtedly in the family. Which was married, it's difficult to say. It doesn't say in the text. Presumably, there are at least two family systems that are involved in this story. And then there's the church family system. There's the synagogue, perhaps, in which this woman and her partner were worshiping, learning. And then there's the leaders of that synagogue, or perhaps the community as a whole, as this went as viral as George Floyd in our community. You can see the woman under authority. Their knees aren't on her neck, but their stones are above her head. And in a cavalier attitude following the law, they're about to do away with her. So we have a great deal of anxiety. I want to talk a little bit about what anxiety means in family systems. So there's the idea of anxiety that we're really commonly familiar with, that is fear, right? Kind of an unmentioned fear. So there's real fear, legitimate fear, when the grizzly bear steps out of the woods and starts chasing you. There's anxiety when there is no grizzly bear, but you think there might be one. And so you feel a little bit cautious walking through the woods. You have anxiety that there might be a bear attack. And of course, stress always leads to this ongoing feeling of anxiety around us. And anxiety is bad. We like to feel at peace. I like to walk through the woods without thinking I'm going to be torn apart by a cougar at any moment. So you put that out of your mind, and you like just to enjoy the scenery. In family systems, anxiety is essentially any level of discomfort created by discord in relationships. And the preferred way people gravitate toward is harmony in relationships. In our own physical bodies, kind of the same thing. I prefer to feel comfortable. I don't take action on anything until I am uncomfortable, right? I sit on my couch and watch TV until I'm hungry, then I get up and eat. I don't work until I realize I can't get something to eat without money to buy it. So I can't watch TV all day, so I go to work. That kind of thing. We are driven by our discomfort. But if most people could wave a magic wand, they'd kind of, chill like a cat on a couch all day long. That may or may not be true. There's different personality types. But the idea is we tend toward comfort. So what's uncomfortable in this story with the woman caught in adultery? Would anybody like to share a point of anxiety? Luke.
Just one?
Yeah, because we want others to share too.
Okay, how about the physical threat of death?
Yeah, there you go. So there's a real level of anxiety, physical threat of death. The woman is no doubt literally in dreadful fear. Yeah. So what kind of anxiety are the Pharisees feeling? James.
Like a community disruption, moral, needing to uphold moral rules and boundaries, a losing of tradition, things like that.
Yeah. We can't allow the moral order or the way in which we do our life to fall apart. And this woman's action is a threat to that. It's even been codified in law. By the way, there's an even bigger threat from their perspective. In the story, the biggest threat on the stage is the disruptor they're trying to trap. I'm going to, Brock, you're a deep theologian, so I'll dump this one on you really fast. Why was Jesus viewed as a threat or an anxiety-producing factor? Oh, and unmute yourself, my brother.
Apparently they knew this was going to be a trap for him, which is interesting in itself, isn't it? You know, to think that they knew the character of Jesus, that he was merciful, and they were going to use his mercy against him.
Why would they want to trap Jesus? Why was Jesus a threat to them?
I was thinking about their motivations. Maybe their motivation was not to get blamed for killing this lady and have it pinned on Jesus. It may have just been, you know, literally killing two birds with one stone. And Jesus was going against the rules, and always, and as you all know, he was at times acting like God, saying, well, this is what the law says, but this is what I say. So they were accumulating a case against him, probably. I was trying to think if this was early in his conflicts with them or later. Probably early, I think, wasn't it? Because John 8 was still fairly early.
It is early.
Yeah. So they're beginning
he's already made enough of an impression on them to have them feel that they need to trap him in something.
You really need to think of them like they're like attorneys. Okay? And they're building a case against him. So I don't know that that's deep, but those are the thoughts that are coming. I'm not all that deep sometimes, but that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, wow,
Yeah.
How did they know? How did they know that he was going to be trapped by that?
That's kind of interesting. Yeah, so there's definitely the conundrum. They knew he was merciful. He had already been clear on that. But would he also be true to the law of Moses? Let's put that one to the test. Well, you have that in your board all the time, by the way, or in your maybe less so on your board. Most of the people on our boards are relatively spiritually mature, and they might have difficulties, but they typically aren't trying to sabotage you. But there will always be a few people in your congregation that are trying to, give you those conundrums of, is God so powerful that he can make a rock that even he can't lift? Tell me the truth, and I'll make sure that I tell everybody what a fool you are, kind of thing. Well, the point that I'm trying to bring out here is that there's all kinds of anxiety in the systems theory approach surrounding this story, including likely the man who isn't on the ground about to be stoned, probably in the crowd, hoping, fearing he might be found out. Well, that would be terrible. So how do you have that disruption? My misdeeds might be discovered. So in every way, there's all kinds of anxiety. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about when there's anxiety in a system, when there's a conflict, when there's a problem, when there's a flashpoint. What are some really common things that take place? And how, as leaders, can we best approach that? And thinking about the story of Jesus, I think, can be really helpful. So again, in systems theory, anxiety is, and I think it's really helpful for us as believers to be thinking about. Anxiety or a level of discomfort, discord. We want harmony. It's a biblical value. But it's just also a core emotional value for us as human beings. There are some common ways in which anxiety is faced or approached with some simple concepts I'd like us to understand. I'm going to break these out. Homeostasis, the non-anxious presence, overfunctioning, triangulation, the identified patient, and process and content. The first thing I want to just re-emphasize, but I won't go deeply because we've been talking about it all morning, is homeostasis. Within any system, there's a desire to maintain balance and avoid anxiety. So obviously, adultery disrupts the homeostasis of a family. That's why it's, bad. And so we want to help bring healing and wholeness to a family. There's obviously a brokenness in the church system. There's a rule that's been broken, a moral code that's wrong. There are multiple sinners that are surrounding this story. And there's deep discontent in most people's hearts when they recognize that what they've done is wrong. And we need to deal with that. Cognitively, by the way, we deal with our own internal sense of wrong with a cognitive tool called dissonance. So if we in our own hearts feel as if what I believe and what I do is not aligned, we have dissonance, not homeostasis or internal harmony. And so we do one of two things. We change what we do to align with what we believe, or we change what we believe to align with what we do. And almost always for human beings, it's the latter. What we're doing, we justify in order to feel at peace with ourselves. We have homeostasis. So there's anxiety in the story with the woman caught in adultery. And then a really common way to deal with anxiety is through process and content, rather than dealing with the relational brokenness that's leading to the dissonance. So in order to avoid relational issues, there's a tendency to focus on stuff that has nothing to do with the real issue at heart, or allowing the real work to be unfinished. And so we see with the Pharisees, they are entirely focused on process and content. They're not really concerned about restoring a family or perhaps even restoring order. They just want to make sure the law is followed, and if they can deal with this brokenness by simply killing the offender and following the law, then they absolve their own sense of discomfort or disharmony. Whose side does Jesus take on this, by the way? You might note Jesus doesn't play the process and content game. He doesn't get into an argument about whether the law is right or wrong on this particular issue, or whether the woman was justified or acting out of systemic discrimination against women and an unfair system, or justifying how painful it must be for a lonely person to be in that situation. And so we need to have compassion on her by understanding he doesn't do any of that. He doesn't deal with process and content. He deals with asking the individuals and groups involved to face their own stuff and to come to their own decision about what's right or wrong in this situation. Another thing that's really common, and we pastors fall into this way of dealing with system more than most, we easily fall prey to overfunctioning. When you have a leader or somebody responsible in a system, they often feel the need to relieve systemic anxiety and will take personal responsibility for the well-being of the whole. This can cause deep long-term stress for the overfunctioner and prevent growth for the group as a whole. Now, you know, as pastors and leaders, that this is certainly something you are prone to do. I am. We all are. We are the leader. We know the Bible. We know the right answers. Let us fix the problem. Luke, you shared really, really well earlier about how there was a systemic issue in your church. People aren't feeling a strong sense of pastoral care in the midst of a pandemic. Trying to do all of that yourself is overwhelming, painful, and hurtful. Thanks be to God, you had a wise board that said, so let's put together a team to help accomplish this. That was a really good way for that church system, your church system, to understand there's a real issue, there's real anxiety, and it can be dealt with in a healthy way, but we're not going to allow any one of us to overfunction. That's really helpful. If we do overfunction, then we burn ourselves out. I think the main reason pastors have burnout. We try to do everything, and we're applauded for it, so we get rewarded, but we don't allow the church to grow. So what did Jesus do? Of course, Jesus did not solve the solution for everybody. He said, okay, you've got this issue. I see the woman. She clearly was in the wrong. I see you guys with your Bibles. Let me draw in the sand a little bit. I want you to think about this. They weren't satisfied. So he stood up and just pushed it even further. Okay, fine. Let me draw in the sand a little bit more. I want you to think more about this. And he forced the Pharisees and the angry mob to come to grips with their own issues. Then he turned to the woman and allowed her to come to grip with her own issues. Hey, nobody's condemning you, but examine your life and leave the aspects of your life that are painful. He didn't fix it. He had others involved face the issues. Now, a super common thing that happens in our churches and our families is the identified patient. This is actually what gave birth to Murray Bowen's family systems theory. He noticed that families would come in, and almost always they'd have a problem person in the family they were trying to fix. We have a kid that's acting out, or a wife that's overindulgent, or a husband that's emotionally distant. The problem is that person. And if we can just fix that person, then everything else is going to be okay. It's the most effective way for a group to avoid anxiety. This happens in politics all the time. Let's pick a particular scapegoated group that we can blame for all the problems in our society. And then if we deal with that group, larger society feels good about themselves because they dealt with the problem. And because there's only a small segment that's been identified as the problem, no big deal for the dominant majority. It's not a problem because they're the problem anyway. So if they're harmed or constricted or jailed or beat or kicked out, well, they deserved it. They're the identified patient. Same thing is true in our boards, except understand that you, as the pastor, more often than not, become the identified patient for your church. If there's something going wrong in the church, who gets the blame? It's probably you. If it's not you, there's somebody in your church that everybody can point to as the problem. Who is the problem in our little story with Jesus and the woman at the well? Who is the problem? Raise your hand if you think you know. Oh, come on. Okay, Theo.
The woman who committed adultery.
Yeah, she was clearly the identified problem. And if we can fix the moral wrongdoer, in this case, not fix, destroy, get rid of the moral wrongdoer in our midst, then we'll be restored to moral harmony. It's a simple solution. Get rid of the bad person, and it's all good. Of course, as you know, as we know, we often fail to see even how we contribute to the behavior of the person who's acting out in an immoral, unhealthy way. Whether it's, by the way, we as pastors do that. We as leaders do that. We as a church can do that. Without owning our own stuff, we become blamers. Nationally, as I said, we do that. Well, that's probably one of the number one things you need to be aware of as a leader. The easy fix, cast out the offender, the conflict person, is rarely the healthiest fix. By the way, that doesn't mean you put a highly conflicted, emotionally compromised, ignorant person, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean they don't know stuff, in a leadership position and then say, oh, let's have patience with this destroyer of harmony. That's not what that means. I mean, good leaders understand that. However, it does mean we should avoid jumping to the easy fix when there's a problem in the church of trying to figure out who's the one person we can blame and get rid of. Jesus didn't do that, obviously. Well, as we continue to think about these basic concepts, one that you've heard of, and we're going to kind of dig into this more deeply in a few moments, is triangulation. And that's when someone wants you to get someone else to do something. It's that simple. You don't have direct conversation with the person causing anxiety for you, discomfort, or disharmony. You want the problem fixed, but in order to fix it, you tell somebody else about the problem. And you hope that either that person will solve the problem for them, or what happens more frequently is by unloading your own sense of anxiety, by getting it out with somebody else, you lower your sense of anxiety, you have a greater sense of harmony in yourself, even though nothing was fixed. And then the next time you face the person that you have a problem with, the anxiety just rises up again. And so rather than deal with it directly, you go and talk to somebody else again. Sometimes the Bible calls that gossip. It is the most common feature in unhealthy human interactions, but it can also be a feature in healthy human interactions. We'll talk about that in a moment. This final aspect of basic family systems concepts I want to share with you is the non-anxious presence, the ability to remain playful, curious, calm, and decisive in the midst of tension. This is what I hope each of us bring to our churches. This is the healthiest, most effective way to deal with an anxious, conflicted, difficult environment. Whether you are the leader or just part of a group, by the way, your ability to bring a centered, healthy, non-anxious presence in the midst of tension, crisis, and anxiety will have a profoundly positive impact on that system. You don't have to be the boss to change the system, but you are a boss. And we need to learn how to approach crises and difficulties with a sense of calm, purpose, and direction in order to lead effectively. If we are reactive to crisis with more anxiety, more anger, more crisis, then that causes it to grow and to flourish in a horrible way. Jesus is such a good model. He didn't appear to get flustered. I mean, he was pretty calm in the midst of this angry mob with stones. And, you know, coming alongside of this woman, again, she's no saint, but a human being, her life being threatened, Jesus didn't get flustered. He very calmly knew what his business was. He had the people face their own issues. He didn't take sides, and he didn't play into the angry mob or placate the sinfulness in the situation. He was true to his principles. Well, it's harder for us because we're not God, but we can grow in such a way as to maybe do this more. So I want to talk a little bit just about how we can start to do this. Let's think about a really important concept. And for me, the concept is really simple. Pastor, it's not about you, or at least it's not just about you. Okay? We tend to personalize other people's behaviors. We tend to think the reason that Jill walked past me after church is because she was offended by something I said. And then we begin to obsess about our relationship with Jill. We tend to think that the reason Jose was so angry at the board meeting with apparently me or at the issue was because of something I said or did. And either I'm the hero because I'm being wrongly persecuted, or I need to fix myself because I clearly did something wrong. And we just personalize everything. But almost always, it's not about you. It's not about what you said. It's not about how you're leading. And we need to depersonalize. We want things to calm down, create homeostasis. We want to distract from issues and go straight to solution. Let's think about what the law says in this matter, rather than helping people process what they're really going through deep inside. We want to be aware of our own self-blame. I'm the problem, so I can fix it. I can fix everything. I'm the amazing leader. Or to blame others. Who's the problem here? And if I just fix them or get rid of them, then all of a sudden everything's going to be okay. Or we just allow our board to continue to follow whatever roles people feel comfortable with. So the jokester, always, we're fine with them telling jokes. We never ask them, what's really important to you? Or the critic, we're fine to just write them off because they're always going to say this or that thing, instead of trying to get to the heart of why are they responding the way they're responding. Or for that matter, the person that always says, oh, Pastor, you're awesome. I love everything you do. And actually asking them, what do you mean by that? Why aren't you actually thinking more deeply about this issue than just being a rubber stamp? We don't always ask who else is in the room, and we don't learn to depersonalize, to become a non-anxious present and to self-differentiate often enough. So let's be aware of these things as we step into leadership. Now, I want to talk about this concept called self-differentiation. To me, it's the most important concept coming out of systems theory for leaders of any kind. And for us as Christian leaders, Jesus is the prime example. Paul also has so many prime examples of how to be self-differentiated. And I'm going to talk about what that means and what the options are. So self-differentiation, as you see I've listed here, is the ability to separate feelings and thoughts. And the ability to separate self from others. That is, just because I feel a particular reaction to a thing doesn't mean I've been able to think it through in a healthy way. We need to understand that a lot of times the way we think or the way we feel, our emotions, are simply a direct response to how we were raised, to what other people in the system are doing, not to what's really important at the matter. Or we become so enmeshed or concerned about what other people think and feel that we often have a difficult time separating our own emotions, our own behavior, from how it's going to impact another person's feelings or thoughts. And we allow what we do to be driven by who we're with and what they're feeling. So again, self-differentiation. Differentiation is the process of freeing yourself from your family's processes to define yourself, to be able to have different opinions and values than your family members, but being able to stay emotionally connected to them. It means being able to calmly reflect on a conflicted interaction, realizing your role and to choose your response. So that goes a lot to what Matt was saying. So he was raised in a particular way of thinking, which is perfectly fine. We can only think that which we know or are exposed to. But then as he began to be exposed to other things, Matt, you talked about really being kind of forced to come to grips with not so much am I simply a product of how I was raised, but what do I really think? Based upon what I know, what do I think is right or wrong, left or right, good or bad? And you begin to have those decisions in a more self-reflective way, in a way that disentangles yourself from needing to be like your parents or needing to reject your parents. Both are equally harmful. Needing to be like other members on your board or needing to reject other people on your board. Both are equally harmful. You as a leader need to be able to differentiate between my anxiety. I really want things to work out here. I really want everybody to like me. I really want us to have harmony on this board. And what needs to be done. If we don't move in this direction as a church, the church will surely die. And it's going to cause pain and anxiety to move through that. So I need to be able to separate how I feel in my anxiety from what I know to be the right, proper, and good outcome that in the long run will in fact lead to harmony and good feelings again. But I need to get through this pain to get there. If we spend our time living in the world of others, we become enmeshed. I'm enmeshed with my wife. I recognize that. When she's sad, I'm sad. When she's happy, I'm happy. Now, I am aware of that and I am differentiated, but I'm also aware that the close relational connection I have means that I actually have a hard time when I'm with her being entirely just myself. In a real way, we become one flesh. Sometimes that's healthy, sometimes that's unhealthy. Connected is healthy. I'm going to talk about that. But when all we can do is act out of a desire to be like, loved, enveloped by another, and we're unable to differentiate between them, their feelings, their needs, and our own, we become enmeshed. And that can happen on a church board or in a church or within groups as well. So we are very close to somebody and we are very fused to them when we are enmeshed. We become isolated when we are very fused with a group. What they do, what they think matters a lot to me. But I either reject it and I reject them, so I grow distant in relationship, or they reject me for whatever reason. I'm the identified patient. I'm isolated. You're still fused because all of your reactions, your negative reactions, are simply a result of your inability to disconnect who you are and what you feel from who everybody else is and what they feel. But you're doing it outside of connection with other people. You're distant. And you know there's people in your church that are either enmeshed or isolated. Leaders, more often than not, fall into the category of being differentiated and distant. You've often heard it said, it's lonely at the top. To be a leader, you have to lead alone. And that sometimes is sadly true. Jesus often led alone. He was rejected after his John 6 message about eating the flesh. Everybody left, except for a few disciples who were like, man, that was a horrible teaching. It really was rotten, but where else are we going to go? So I guess we're hanging with you. Not that we like it. So Jesus was leading alone in some points. When you lead and you have clarity of purpose and direction, that means people who are enmeshed or isolated will reject you or cling on to you, either which, but often reject you and hate you and not like what you're saying. When that happens, because it's painful for us to deal with people who don't like us, we distance ourselves. And so we distance ourselves emotionally and relationally from people when there's discomfort, even if we're leading with self-differentiated purpose. The healthiest way to lead is in a connected way, where you know your purpose, you know your values, and you know how you must lead. But when people reject you for it, that doesn't drive you away from them. They may be driven away from you, but you're more than happy to approach, as Jesus had dinner with the Pharisees, by the way, throughout John, even after that particular incident, you're still able to talk with people. You still call them up. You still pray for them. You're still concerned about them. Doesn't mean you chase after them. That's equally unhealthy and a whole different teaching. But you don't distance yourself from them. So as we share this, I just wonder, are there any among us that could raise a hand that would say, honestly, it's easier not to talk to people that disagree with me and to lead when I know things are right than to try to keep a bridge open with people who disagree with me? Anybody relate to that? I mean, I do, right? So no wonder it's hard for leaders. The hardest thing is to lead well, which creates conflict always, but lovingly, which keeps bridges open, always. Now, bridges open doesn't mean you accept misbehavior. Again, Jesus did not accept the misbehavior of the woman caught in adultery, nor the misbehavior, no doubt, that he was drawing into the sand. That's my theory. That was causing people to come to grips with their own issues. Likewise with us. So I'm going to throw out this little concept. It's probably stupid. I'm only sharing it because I'm the only one that I know that's ever talked about it this way. But I think of this as love and holiness. Holiness is that which keeps us purposeful. Love is that which keeps us connected. And I think about that in terms of biology, in terms of a cell. A really simple way to think about a cell is a nucleus and a membrane. There's a lot more in a cell than just a nucleus. But the heart of a cell is a nucleus. The heart of your church is Jesus Christ and the values around Jesus. And when we grow and we multiply, we hope that Jesus multiplies. The nucleus contains the DNA, the genes, so that when a cell multiplies, it does so following the instructions of the nucleus. But a cell can't exist without a membrane. A cell needs to have something that keeps the cell stuff inside. A cell needs something that separates it from other cells with slightly different functions, even if they share the same DNA. So there needs to be a membrane, holiness, that which is, yes, I do this, no, I don't do that. I draw the line here. The membrane, love, yes, I will multiply, I will reach out, I will keep things open and viable for ongoing growth and multiplication. We need both. And a tendency for us as leaders is to focus on one and ignore the other. If we don't have a membrane, we don't actually have a cell. If we don't have order in our church, if we don't have principles, if we don't have things that we will do and things we will not do, then we don't have a functioning body. You don't have skin around the body, which differentiates that body from other bodies. That's not a bad thing. Differentiation is good. It's the heart of healthy leadership paired with love or multiplication. So I want to think about differentiation, and I want to think about how we can approach this leading in our churches. And for me, the most important thing is to recognize that I don't like the phrase self-differentiation because I think I'm too enmeshed with Jesus. I prefer Christ differentiation. I do have a sense of self, and so do you, but our sense of self in the healthiest way needs to be brought to life and made true and good through identification with Christ. So we see in 2 Corinthians 5:7, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. What is old has passed away. Look at what new has come. Our identity needs to be grounded in Jesus so that our old past misbehavior, complete world dictated by how we were raised, the culture we're in, the world in which we're in, becomes less dominant and Christ becomes more dominant, allowing us to lead with Christian purpose. Or 2 Timothy 4:3, for the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they'll gather around them in numbers of teachers, saying what their itching ears want to hear. We know that can happen so easily. You yourself can follow unsound doctrine. You yourself can allow your itching ears to hear what you want to hear. Right now in this world with our little micro echo chambers where people that tend right only listen to people that tend right. People that tend left only listen to people that tend left. And the more you do that, the more you know you're right and the more you know the other people are wrong. What 2 Timothy 4:3 tells us about a real danger is a danger for us as leaders more so than maybe any other time in the history of the world, unless we're Christ differentiated. And when that happens, we become like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. By the way, if you want a good biblical guide to self-differentiated leadership and how to do it, just read Psalm 1. Don't sit in the seat of the mockers or listen to the scoffers. Instead, draw near to the word of God and allow your roots to go deep. And all of that stuff will not sway you. You can be the well-rooted tree in the midst of a storm. So as you lead, understand, I know it's crazy. You never would have predicted leading in a pandemic. Of course, you've had to deal with racism, but pandemic and the largest global series of civil rights revolts and protests in the I think, the history of the world, actually, certainly since the 50s and 60s in America, has taken place in our lifetime. And simple things like, how do you get people to think outside themselves and share Jesus with other people, or change basic structures in church? You lead with conflict all the time. So what I'm going to do is help us think about how important it is for you to stay centered in Jesus, self-differentiated, and not be too upset or too concerned about how other people are feeling or reacting to you. Because remember, it's not about you. They're reacting out of their own stuff. And when you try to fix a relationship one week, I guarantee with nothing that you're doing, it can change the next week because of the systems we live in. Now, this is mostly next going to be kind of a demonstration of triangulation and how it works in your church. And sometimes how it certainly can work to your favor, by the way. And we're almost done. And I know you're thinking, yay, it's about time, way too long. But here I have a simple picture. And it's a simple picture of a pastor with a small board of 4, Darnell, Ted, Jose, and Alicia. And these lines mean different things. A single line means you're in relationship. It's a good relationship. It's not a strong emotional tie, but it's not an unhealthy tie and there's no conflict. You're in a good relationship. That's probably true for you and the majority of people in your church, thanks be to God, and certainly on your board. There are stronger relationships. They can be kinship, friendship, partnerships, where you have a very strong affinity. And so Pastor and Darnell have a very strong relationship, whereas Alicia and Ted and the pastor have a basically good relationship. And Jose and the pastor just don't get along. There's conflict there. So you see what those pictures mean. Now, when you are in a room, you are not dealing just with Darnell, Ted, Alicia, Jose. You are dealing with a plethora, a cloud of witnesses, so to speak. In your church, you have Maria's small group, which is part of your church, and that's impacting people. You have your board of bishops and the superintendent telling you what you're supposed to say and believe and do and all that kind of stuff, and that can be really stressful, but that's part of the system. You have the youth group, and that's part of your system. And you have Frank, and then, you know, in everybody's family, there's Grandpa Joe, and then there's Jill who's off in college or whatever. But it goes beyond that in your system. You also have various institutions, other churches, hospitals, the CDC. You have other friends. There's ideologies that people can rally around. And all of these ideas of relationship, entanglement, enmeshment, isolation, connectedness, aloneness. We're not just talking about relationships one-on-one with people. We're also talking about relationships we have with worldviews, with institutions, with other churches, with news stations. Fox News and CNN, man, both have pretty gone far to the left and to the right. The Fox channel is, let's only talk about what the president has done well. And the CNN channel is, let's only talk about what the president has done wrong. It's hard to actually get global news or local news of anything other than a critique, pro or con, of a particular politician. But that's part of our world right now. So all of that is impacting these relationships. So I go into a board meeting and I have a pretty strong relationship with Bishop Matt. Turns out Darnell and Matt are friends too, and they actually talk every now and then. And because the bishop told Darnell that he really digs what I'm doing, Darnell's relationship with me is strengthened, not because of anything I've done with Darnell, but because I have a strong relationship with the bishop, and Darnell has a pretty good one. Darnell now has a stronger relationship with me. Isn't that great? I didn't do anything to merit Darnell's high opinion. It's just that he had a relationship in a triangle that I'm not even aware of that made him feel good about me. Likewise, Jose, I mean, I've done everything I can to try to have a good relationship with Jose, but he keeps being mad at me. What I don't know is that he's a really close friend with Frank. And Frank has a friend that was really offended by a message I preached on drinking. It was 6 months ago. But his friend, he deals with alcohol and he has an alcoholic family. And he thought that I was specifically criticizing him. So his friend brings that to his close friend, Frank and says, you know what, that pastor's a real jerk, holier than thou, criticizing things he doesn't know about. And Frank, who's a close friend with Jose, is like, man, that pastor is a jerk. You might not think so, but I sure do. And now Jose does too. I did nothing to Jose to merit his bad opinion of me. But because of Jose's relationship with the friend who doesn't like something I said, Jose feels bad about me. Friends, does that make sense? It's not about you. Or if it is, it's often not directly about you. Now, here's the thing. It actually gets better and worse because no system stays the same because things are always changing. So this week, Jose doesn't like me. Alicia and Ted have a good relationship with me, and Darnell thinks I walk on water. But next week, Jose all of a sudden starts liking me. I have no idea why, but it's cool that he does. But what really just came out of the blue, I can't understand why Ted is now saying I'm marching to the devil of Gavin Newsom because I'm asking people to wear masks. Ted, who was my friend, we've always gotten along on everything, all of a sudden thinks that I'm leading toward a satanic ritual. Where'd that come from? All right. Well, look, it just so happened I had another message, and I preached the message, and it happened to really touch Frank's friend's heart. And all of a sudden, he thinks, oh, wow, I don't know what changed in the pastor. Nothing changed in the pastor. The perspective of the friend changed in the pastor. But all of a sudden, I think he's pretty cool. Frank, did you know how cool your pastor is? Oh, really? He is? Frank tells Jose, wow, I think the pastor is really cool. Well, now I've got a friend that I had nothing to do with it, except I kept a good connection with somebody I didn't know was impacting Jose's relationship with me. Likewise, nothing I said or did or anybody else on the board is going to make any difference to Ted because he has a relationship with Grandpa Joe. And Grandpa Joe has a relationship with Sean Hannity. And Sean, by the way, I'm not saying this to make out Sean Hannity as good or bad. And I don't even know what Sean says about masks. I'm just completely making this up, okay? But so Grandpa Joe hears Sean Hannity say that evil California, and by the way, I have heard President Trump say recently, everybody in California is dumb. So there's this bad view of California. So evil California being led by evil Governor Newsom is causing us to go down this evil route. Well, Ted is getting this from Fair and Balanced News and Grandpa Joe, whom he respects. So no doubt, nothing I say is going to really change Ted's mind. Ted is going to believe what he believes. Right, everybody? And by the way, the person that might be listening to MSNBC, and I just made that up as well, listening to Rachel Maddow might come to a completely different and equally conflicted conclusion. I'm not making a statement about a particular point of view, just where do these points of view come from? It doesn't matter what you do, they're going to come your way. Don't get bent out of shape. Okay, we're almost in the home stretch here, friends. And I know you're thinking again, hooray, we need to be done with this. I've got stuff to do. So the next week, all of a sudden, the relationship with Ted is actually full of love. That's a shocker, because a week before, he was ready to tear your heart out and sacrifice it on the mount in Peru at Machu Picchu. Yes, Theo, I was listening to your heart's desire. And then Alicia, who had a good relationship, is now all bent out of shape. Why? Well, Ted's all still listening to Fox News and Grandpa Joe, but his daughter from college came back, and daughter Jill is the apple of Ted's eye. And Ted will do anything for daughter Jill. And Jill is like, oh, I can't believe how wonderful it is that California is taking important positions about protecting people from the coronavirus. Yeah, but I'm listening to Fox News. Yeah, but if you love me, you're really going to help your church do the right thing, Ted. So Ted, his heart really warmed by Jill, even though he still holds competing points of view, that relationship drives a new relationship with you. Thank you, Jill. That's awesome. But again, Pastor, it's not about you. You had nothing to do with it. On the other hand, you had nothing to do with the fact that the bishops, by the way, really excellent, and everybody should watch every single video they've produced in relation to having Black leaders in our denomination speak to the current issues. They are solid gold. I've been dealing with racial dialogue and reconciliation issues for 20 years. I was a community organizer in Chicago, and that was the major thing I did. I have rarely heard anything as good as what our denomination is producing in a spirit of love and truth. But some people misunderstand it anyway. So the bishops say this about, yes, Black lives do matter. And this amazing church that Maria's small group listens to all the time is saying, you know what? Anybody that says Black lives matter doesn't care about everybody. And in fact, the point of view of our bishops is rubbing them the wrong way. And so this other church, who has an axe to grind against Black Lives Matter, after all, it's blue lives and all lives, let's get on the boat of harmony, is infecting Maria's small group, which Alicia belongs to. And so the last month, all they've talked about is how terrible the Free Methodist Church is by talking about racial issues when we should be leaving it alone and talking about harmony and peace. So now Alicia, who was a friend, is totally upset with you, the pastor, because you are talking about racial issues lovingly, kindly, and truthfully, but it doesn't matter. You've actually uttered the scandalous words, Black Lives Matter. So not that Alicia actually cared until her small group told her she needs to care. Now she cares intensely, and you're the problem. But again, you aren't the problem. And you never will be. You don't have that much power. Go figure. You, as a self-differentiated, Christ-differentiated leader, just always need to remember these things. Right? The message of Paul. What am I now, seeking the approval of man or of God? Am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I cannot be a servant of Christ. Your goal is not to try to make Darnell, Alicia, Jose, or Ted happy or appease them. It doesn't matter, because if you did one week, next week they're going to talk to somebody else and the relationship is going to change and has nothing to do with you. So stay focused on Jesus and what you know to be right. Do not be anxious in it. That's the major field of issue that we deal with our conversation here. Don't be anxious about anything and everything. In prayer, supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. If there's anyone to be enmeshed with, and let me just say actually connected closely with, is God. Turn to God. Turn to God in prayer. Cast your anxieties with others upon God in prayer. And that gives you the ability to allow your anxiety to be lifted from your heart so you can stay in good contact, even with people that don't like you from week to week. To love your enemies. And by the way, your enemies change from time to time. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and of love and of self-control. Okay, just some thoughts about leadership in the midst of a pandemic, financial difficulty, racial discrimination, pain, left-right polarization, and trying to lead with balance in the midst of all of that. It's really hard, but I hope that when we're aware that it's not about you, and that no matter what you say or teach or do, keeping it centered on Jesus, some people will love you and some people will hate you, and those people will change every week. If we can't stay principled, our church won't stay principled. If we can't lead in a non-anxious way, then our church will grow as anxious, as unprincipled as we are leading. And you can't do this by yourself. You need Jesus. Cast your care upon God. God cares about you. Okay, thus ends the teaching for the day. Any thoughts before we conclude? I'll make a few announcements. And what I'm going to do is just go around in a circle and ask if there's anything anybody would like to say. And if you don't want to say anything, just wave. If you do want to say anything, just unmute, and that's fine. But before we have announcements, just Matt, anything you'd like to share or say?
Yeah, two quick questions. Is self-differentiation or Christ differentiation the opposite of codependency? Like,
yeah, in a very real way. Codependency and enmeshment and isolation, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Codependency is when you can't separate your own feelings, your own actions from the needs, feelings, or actions of another. And that's either completely aligned, enmeshment, or completely opposed, isolation. Same thing.
Gotcha. And that perfect. And then my second question is a much harder one. How do you lead in the midst of feeling like this is age old, right? A feeling you're doing what Christ is asking you to do, or what's theologically correct, in the middle of a region of churches who think the exact opposite is Christ-centered and theologically correct.
Yeah, you mean America?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say two things. First, I think we need to even approach our own view that what we're doing is Christ-centered and theologically correct with a great deal of humility. I think I'm right, but I thought I was right with completely different points of view 10 years ago. And 10 years before that, I thought I was right with completely different set of perspectives. So we're always in process. And I think one of the most important things to recognize as we lead with principle, as we lead in the way that we think is right, is to lead with a huge dose of humility in knowing that, my word, I could change my mind another year from now, maybe because I'm listening to all those people that think what I'm doing is wrong, and I can actually learn from that. So I think one way, now I'm self-reflective here, how do I lead in that circumstance? One thing I do is by not taking myself that seriously. So I don't think that I have to be the defender of truth. I think that I need to share what I believe God has revealed to me now, but I don't need to feel offended if others are against me, because I actually might be wrong. I'm not going to change what I think because other people think I'm wrong or because it's difficult, but I need to hold out the possibility that I might still grow even more. So that gives me patience. And then there is no easy way, Matt. That's the whole point of this. We need to be able to tolerate pain. That's all there is to it. And to recognize that we can't change other people's minds. We can influence. Leadership is influence. We can't change. God doesn't change you. If that were a thing, then God would just by fiat say everybody's a loving follower of Jesus. But God doesn't even do that. So if God first refuses to exercise that power, which I believe he probably has, he's omniscient, omnipotent, but he chooses not to, why in the world did I get bent out of shape if I can't change somebody else's perspective? So that perspective helps me stay calm in the scenario that you're describing, knowing full well that other churches will think our church is a dweeb church or a state-controlled entity or has fallen prey to the wiles of the devil or whatever. Don't worry, there's another group of churches that think that of you for a completely different reason than you think. Doesn't matter. So thanks be to God that the scripture says, who are you to judge another servant of mine? I judge them. I've called them to do what they're called to do. I've called you to do what you're called to do. Don't get bent out of shape if somebody else is doing what they think I've called them to do. I'm God. You're not. Chill. That was a big paraphrase. Matt, that was a really good question in the heart of the whole point of this teaching today. So again, I'm just going to go, it's kind of John Wesley's, are things clear with your heart thing. Theo, how about you? Any comments, questions? Again, you don't have to say anything, just.
Yeah, I mean, I just right along what you're saying, I struggle with this constant balance between leading people towards something that I believe in and understanding that God speaks through the group's hearts. And so there's this constant balance, which I'm not sure, I don't know how to, I wondered if you had any wisdom on this, you know, because at the same time you're getting people together, you're sharing. I see some people who are saying, this is what God says, and so this is what I'm going to do. And they're not really open to the fact that God speaks through other people. And the same thing's true for me. I need to be open to other people speaking and take that seriously and pray over the things that people are saying. But it's like this weird process where the goal is kind of developed in relationship as all of you are open to the Holy Spirit. So there's this tension always between listening to what other people are saying, bringing it to God, and trying to find God's best for your family through that process. It's very messy. It's not, I wish I just knew exactly what God wanted for everybody and could help guide the group towards that. But instead, it's this organic process where I'm trying to hear God speak through the group, you know, and the Holy Spirit. At the same time, I'm trying to lead that group. It's very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the heart of the challenge of a good leader. You just described being a good leader, rather than simply saying, I'm going to do what the masses say, or simply saying, they must all do what I dictate. Both are unhealthy. One is enmeshment and one is isolation. Neither is healthy. You are standing in the crucible that every good leader stands in. And there's that's the difficulty with leadership. There is no such thing as leadership at peace. That's the reality. I mean, there's the peace that passes understanding from knowing that you're following Christ and living out a life of love and holiness as the Spirit empowers, and graciously seeking God's forgiveness for when you don't, and knowing that we're all in that process. But what you just described, Theo, and what I've seen every leader in this virtual room do, is powerful. It's that non-anxious presence, where what you're doing is modeling being able to listen, come to a conclusion, make a decision, and move forward. The act of listening and incorporating good and better practices as a result is a sign of health, not weakness. The act of being able to say, well, my judgment as a leader and my awareness of the scripture says that would not be good even if I heard you say it, and to be the cell membrane is also a function of a leader. And they're different, and they compete, and they strain, and they hurt. But when you lead in that non-anxious presence, staying connected, love, staying true, holiness, then you and the church get better over time. But somebody has to lead with that sense of quiet strength in the midst of conflict for a church to get through the conflict and toward a better future. So I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, there literally is no easy thing. Prayer, scripture, and being connected with people who love you is helpful. Good. Samuel. And again, you don't have to say anything. We can certainly just end because we're over time now.
Well, what came to mind throughout your talk on family systems theory and self-differentiation is a book I read, which introduced me to that whole concept, and I found it profoundly helpful. And I actually read that book at the same time I was reading another book, and found them to kind of parallel all the stuff that you talked about. And really, for me, it gave me the parallel of self and Christ differentiation that you described. So as you're going through there and talking about all that, I'm thinking of these two books and this journey I went on with them. So I'm just going to give you the titles, and you guys can choose what you want to do, read them or not. The first one, the book that I read systems theory was A Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. It's a really good book. He's Jewish and very challenging, but basically does the psychology of what you described. And then the other book I read at the same time was Ruth Haley Barton's Sacred Rhythms, which is about the spiritual disciplines, but she uses the word rhythm instead. And I was reading these at the same time, and what I felt like I heard God saying to me was, he's on to something with this understanding of anxiety and family systems, and she's giving you how you deal with it from a Christocentric perspective. And so I read them together, and really found that the journey for me was as a pastor and as a leader in the church, was finding that center, that grounding in Christ's differentiation through my own soul formation, and then that impacts the system that I'm tasked with leading as a pastor, which is the church. And so anyway, all that to say, I recommend both of those books, and I read them at the same time and found them to be really good conversation partners as books. So anyway, that's my last two thoughts.
Super, super good. A slide I didn't show is actually a bibliography on things of this nature. Feel free to send me books that have, or articles or resources that have been in a healthy way influential for you. After tomorrow's lead meeting, we do them in threes. I do them in threes. Then I will be sending out a copy of the slideshow that I showed you and a list of other resources if you're interested, which can be helpful in leading a church leadership team through, by the way. And Sam, both those books are on my bibliography, and they are fantastic. If you read Friedman's book, he's one of the best he's dead now, one of the best in the field. As a Christian, you will be startled to hear him say, empathy is your enemy. So I'm going to let that resonate and maybe be an intrigue, because it's a really helpful process in leadership to think about the way he speaks of it in terms of systems theory. So read his book if you want to be challenged. Matt. Okay. Luke.
Not so much a question, but a little bit of self-reflection, okay?
Sure.
This particular discussion topic today, I wouldn't have known it was exactly what I needed to talk about today if you'd asked me ahead of time, but it was. I realized during this talk that I have a large amount of anxiety that I'm aware of, but hadn't been able to put words to. And I have a difficult time processing emotional systems that I can't put words to. I have a hard time processing things I can't explain and identify and parse out. And so it was really helpful to me to see that, to some degree, I'm allowing my opinion of my own efforts in ministry to be shaped by an enmeshed reaction to the opinions of the people in my church, and especially people on my board, but not just people on my board, which is really confusing and causes that intense anxiety because some of them love what I'm doing and some of them really don't. So I have some people who I'm getting feedback from that's really negative and saying, you failed in these ways. These are the ways that you're insufficient. And so I'm the identified patient there. You're the problem. And since I'm enmeshed with their opinions of me, I also react by trying to overperform. They're right. I'm the problem. I must fix everything. And on the other hand, I'm getting really positive opinions from other people. And wow, you're doing a great job in a hard situation. And I like the way you did this. And I like the way you did that. And I'm enmeshed in their opinions too. And so my reaction to that is to try and cling in every way I can to homeostasis. Okay, I'm doing some things right. Don't change anything. So I have this massive anxiety internally between don't change anything or you'll mess it all up, and you've already messed it all up. You need to fix everything. And the core of that is not whether I'm doing a good job or not. The core of that is that my opinion of my ministry has become enmeshed with other people's opinion of it. And that's going to take a fair amount of unpacking for me.
Yeah.
So just
Thank you,
wanted to,
Luke.
I also am very much an external processor, so I can only think when I'm talking. So thanks for letting me say that.
Thanks for sharing that. And to also what Theo said, it lines up very much with what you said. And Sam, as you've been reflecting, this is always a process. We're always in a journey. So, I had this happy square that said connected, and it was aligned with being differentiated and close to others as an ideal, and said Jesus was kind of the best model of that. Guess what? We ain't Jesus. But being aware of what's happening helps us process through it ourselves and grow. So thank you, Luke. That was wonderful. Brock, again, I don't have to say anything, but you're welcome to.
I was just reflecting. Those drawings were two-dimensional. And one thing that brings me a lot of comfort is there's a third dimension, and everybody who's a believer has a relationship with God. And so what I was thinking about is a little different, but I wonder if there's a way that you can account for some of those two-dimensional aspects, but also operate with the third dimension, not only in your own relationship with the Lord, but in a connection as a group with the Holy Spirit that allows the Holy Spirit to do the heavy lifting in people's lives. Because I find myself, like you guys are reflecting, wrapped up in the two-dimensional aspect. And maybe my relationship with the Lord is affected by that. But really, I think there's a third dimension and an above dimension where the Holy Spirit has a relationship with everybody, including the pastor. And it's not up to me to pass the spiritual across. It's up to the Holy Spirit to work with those individuals and sometimes bring conviction when they're not aligning. So I wonder if there's a way to enhance that three-dimensional aspect of the relationship.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's just a thought. I'm just thinking.
Just a thought. I told you were deep, Brock. Check that. I'm going to have to change my presentation now to account.
I've been told that I was deep in it lots of times. So yeah, I'm very deep in it.
Well, truly.
Sometimes I'm full of it too. But
most of the text that I referred to in terms of our keeping grounded in Jesus and getting those roots sunk deep relates to prayer, the power of prayer and being connected with God. Also, Sam, you mentioned Ruth's book, which is all about those spiritual rhythms that keep us connected with God. But, one thing I don't think I mentioned at all, Brock, and I feel like a unspiritual person. I've just grown through what you said. In terms of triangulation, the biggest powerful piece of triangulation is prayer. You talk to God, and God talks to others. I love it. They talk to God, and God talks to you. I love it. The people of Israel are under oppression, and they cry out to God, and God hears, and he cries out to Moses, and Moses hears, and delivery happens. Wow. Okay.
I wasn't thinking about that. I was more just thinking, well, there's two dimensions, there's three dimensions, kind of pretty simple. But now I'm going to have to think about what you're saying too.
that was deeply insightful for me.
Yeah,
So
well, good.
To your point, sometimes we can learn by listening to others. James, you have the final wrap before some quick announcements. Try to beat Brock's deep insight. No, it can't be done. Well, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for investing a little over 2 hours now with the virtual lead meeting.